Faithfully delivering value, unpacking great books from around the world. Hi, this is Sally with Book Talks. Back in the Great Depression of 1931, the U.S. came up with the American dream to lift spirits. Basically, it says America is super fair, offering a level playing field for all. If you work hard and dare to fight, anyone can rise up and make it big. But honestly, many average Americans work their tails off, yet their life savings don't match what the rich blow in a day. Is it really that some folks just aren't trying hard enough? Or is society itself messed up? After World War II, philosopher John Rawls dug into this, and his big idea is what we're talking about today: the theory of justice. Before we dive in, Rawls is seen as one of the top thinkers of the 1900s. His whole life's work centered on fairness and justice. Born in 1921, he hit the Great Depression as a kid, unprecedented hardship. As a young man, World War II rolled around. Rawls got drafted and saw all sorts of horrors in the war. After the war, Rawls left the army and headed to college. He wanted to understand why injustice exists. How do we fix injustice? By 1971, as a Harvard professor, he pulled together years of papers into his first book. The book's called A Theory of Justice, often just justice theory. Surprise! This dense tone got the academic world buzzing. The Harvard Press edition alone sold over 400,000 copies. Even though Rawls wrote bits over time, the book's got a clear structure. 3 big parts. Part 1's the heart, laying out his justice theory. Part 2's application. Rawls imagines a just society from his theory. Part 3's extras, tackling how to keep a just society going, balancing space and weight. Today we'll focus more on Part 1 of justice theory. All right, let's dive into Part 1, where Rawls digs into justice. So first we must ask, why is justice worth all this fuss? To Rawls, justice is to society what truth is to a scientific theory. No matter how many terms or complex formulas a theory has, if it's false and lacks truth, it's pseudoscience. The same holds for society. We can judge it by many standards, like public safety, national income levels, or environmental efforts. But if a society loses justice, it's on shaky ground. Even with sky-high incomes or perfect safety, it's all worthless. So why is justice paramount? Rawls argues it's because justice governs how benefits are shared. Pretty straightforward. People join societies for greater benefits than going solo, but this raises how to distribute rights and duties. Simply put, it's like slicing a cake. Who cuts or how doesn't matter, but the shares must be fair. Take even a ruthless gang. They'd collapse if loot wasn't split evenly. Thus, justice is essential for any society to function. Knowing justice theory tackles fair distribution, did Rawls's era lack answers? Actually, yes, utilitarianism, Rawls's chief rival theory. In Western thought, utilitarianism was hugely influential. Pioneered by British thinker Jeremy Bentham, who saw justice debates as too abstract and divisive. So utilitarians focused on tangible needs instead. Is hunger satisfied? Is education accessible? Binary outcomes, met or not, no ambiguity. Thus, utilitarianism deems a society just if it maximizes satisfaction for the most people. Imagine a government building a mountain road to boost the economy, but having to demolish one home due to terrain limits. The economic benefits from improved transportation far exceed the villagers' relocation and compensation costs. According to utilitarian thinking, demolishing one household's home can bring the greatest happiness to the greatest number. Thus, this action is perfectly just. Utilitarian logic isn't hard to understand. It's concise, efficient, and appears in many daily decisions. However, Rawls argues that utilitarianism often sacrifices the basic rights of minorities for the majority's benefit. This is a fatal flaw, just like in that earlier road example. Suppose, after the road is built, this village needs a bus route. Unfortunately, it's sparsely populated and remote, making bus service very costly. From a utilitarian standpoint, it's best to bypass the village with the bus, saving time, money, and being eco-friendly. But the consequence is that we sacrifice some people's right to travel. Clearly, at this point, using utilitarianism as the sole decision standard becomes inappropriate. Let's take another ethical dilemma. Suppose a traffic accident occurs where a doctor and a homeless man are both critically injured and rushed to the hospital, but unfortunately, the blood bank is low, with only enough blood for one person. So who should we save? From a utilitarian stance, we should save the doctor, because if saved, the doctor can help more people and contribute more to society. But from a simple moral intuition, we'd find utilitarian thinking too cold, even inhumane. Life has no hierarchy. Even if he's homeless, a person's right to live shouldn't be easily taken away. So while utilitarianism seems persuasive at first glance, if taken to its extreme, it becomes intolerable to many. It was precisely from utilitarianism's flaws that Rawls began to construct his own theory of justice. And his principles can be derived from a thought experiment called the veil of ignorance. The veil of ignorance thought experiment is a modification of traditional social contract theory. And in modern times, Western thinkers used social contract theory to explain society's origins, arguing that society didn't always exist. Initially, people lived in a state of nature, solitary and free, but because living alone was inconvenient, humans decided to gather, create a social contract, and live collectively. Now, did this actually happen in history?
Nobody knows, and Rawls wasn't concerned about that.
Here he tweaked social contract theory, using the veil of ignorance to derive principles for a just society. He asks us to imagine the scenario. Suppose we return to an original position, like the state of nature in social contract theory, to discuss together what kind of society do we want to live in. For people in the original position, Rawls sets two conditions. First, assume everyone has sound minds and full rationality, meaning we're all intellectually competent, capable of normal decision-making, with each choice based on independent judgment. As for rationality, it requires decisions to maximize self-interest. We're also risk-averse, rationally diversifying risks for security, not gambling for high returns. The second requirement, beyond rationality, we're stripped of everything else, utterly unaware of who we are. For instance, not knowing if we're Bill Gates or a construction worker, a star athlete or disabled. Not knowing if we're Ivy League graduates or high school dropouts. It's like being blindfolded, seeing nothing. This is the so-called veil of ignorance. Under these premises, people won't be swayed by self-interest into biased decisions. Instead, when establishing rules for distributing benefits, we must ask, if I were society's most vulnerable, how would I want this divided? Now, two traditional distribution schemes lie before us. The first is utilitarianism, which we just discussed. Accepting utilitarianism means ignoring the worst off, even sacrificing them to boost overall welfare. But behind the veil, since anyone could be last, utilitarianism becomes unacceptable. The second is laissez-faire. This approach might claim fairness is achieved simply by guaranteeing education rights. How far you go just depends on how hard you work. Society doesn't need to step in. But then again, if you're a kid from a rich family, you can go to tutoring classes and hire good tutors. Your future prospects are usually better than those of kids from poor families. At this point, how benefits are distributed is all about the luck of birth. And that's unfair, because our background isn't something we choose. In the end, the laissez-faire approach is all about luck, just like buying a lottery ticket. But rational people behind the veil of ignorance are risk-averse and can't accept gambling everything. Since these two old paths don't work, Rawls proposed his own new solution. Please note, this new approach is also the most important contribution of the theory of justice. It mainly consists of two principles. The first is called the greatest equal liberty principle, and the second is the difference principle. Let's start with the greatest equal liberty principle. Rawls says that behind the veil of ignorance, everyone would agree that each person has equal rights to the most extensive basic liberties. The freedom one enjoys must be compatible with the same freedom for others. According to this principle, first, everyone's basic liberties are equal. All should have the same rights, including the right to participate in political life, express opinions, and have private property protected by law. Even if you're a kid from a poor family, you can still vote, and your vote carries the same legal weight as a rich person's. Second, this principle requires that while enjoying your freedom, you don't infringe on others' freedom. For example, you have the freedom to speak and to watch movies, but in a cinema, you should stay quiet, or you'll interfere with others' freedom. Overall, the greatest equal liberty principle is fairly easy to grasp. It ensures everyone in society has the same dignity and enjoys the same rights. This principle may seem simple, but Rawls believes it's the most fundamental one, and no social policy should violate it. But in real life, indeed, some people are naturally faster runners, some are smarter, some are more attractive. Even if everyone is equal in rights, luck always brings inequality. Faced with this inequality, we can't impose one-size-fits-all solutions to force equality, nor can we just ignore it. So, how exactly do we solve this? The difference principle proposed by Rawls is meant to handle this issue. This principle requires that social and economic inequalities must only tie to career choices and not involve discrimination based on innate talents. If inequalities in a society can't be eliminated, they must benefit the most vulnerable. This principle tackles differences in wealth and talents, hence it's called the difference principle. Since under the veil of ignorance, anyone could become the worst off, then accepting this principle is the most rational decision. Next, let's discuss the difference principle further from two aspects. The first aspect emphasizes that job opportunities must be open to everyone. Rawls doesn't deny that some jobs pay more, some pay less. Plus, everyone has different talents and excels at different jobs. Suppose in the US, whites might be better at math than blacks, making it easier to become programmers. Then their income would naturally be higher, but that can't justify discrimination in hiring. Tech companies can't set discriminatory policies like assuming blacks won't perform well and only hiring whites. If a black person genuinely isn't suited for the job, fails tasks, earns less, and quits, that's acceptable. It's their choice, they knew the risks. But blocking people based on random talents is unjust. The second aspect stresses that inequalities must benefit disadvantaged groups. For example, a top movie actor earns much more than a sanitation worker. An actor might earn in a day what a worker saves in a lifetime, but swapping jobs won't fix the gap. It might hurt both economies, so we must make the inequality favor the worker. For instance, workers could pay no taxes, while high-earning actors share their tax burden, or even fund labor stipends. This way, big tax inequalities make income gaps tolerable, ultimately helping the vulnerable. Rawls's two principles combined state that all valuable things in society, like wealth, dignity, jobs, should be distributed equally to everyone, unless the unequal distribution of something benefits the least advantaged.
Because Rawls focused on distributive fairness, he called his understanding of justice as fairness.
That is justice. With that, we've covered part one of justice theory. Let's summarize. Utilitarianism advocates the greatest happiness for the greatest number, but this approach often neglects minorities' freedoms and rights. To counter utilitarianism, Rawls proposed new justice principles through a thought experiment. He has us enter an original position to collectively establish fair societal rules. There, people are behind the veil of ignorance, knowing only they're rational individuals. From this, we derived the greatest equal liberty principle, the foundation of all rules. Then we agreed on the difference principle to maximize protection for the vulnerable. It concludes the theoretical part of justice theory. So, what would a just society look like based on Rawls's principles? Next, we'll explore the application part, how to design a society using justice principles. But note, justice theory's main work is theoretical construction. Part two on application is more of a framework. Rawls called his ideal society a well-ordered society involving political or economic frameworks and individual society relations. First, the political framework, embodying the greatest equal liberty principle. Rawls believed securing basic freedoms requires at least two things: a representative democracy,
ensuring equal voting rights, one person, one vote, giving all political participation access.
This seems obvious, a modern Western consensus, nothing new. But remember, in the democratic U.S., women only got voting rights in 1920, and Black Americans not until 1965. Rawls wrote during America's civil rights movement, deliberately re-emphasizing this to protect everyone's freedom. Secondly, there needs to be a fair legal system. Rawls believed that a well-ordered society is also one governed by the rule of law. For example, laws should be transparent and accessible to all. Legislation should emerge from rational discourse, not arbitrary decisions. Laws provide fundamental protection for everyone, and we must all operate within this framework. Now let's discuss economic institutions.
For Rawls, individual liberty takes priority, so he rejected planned economies and endorsed private property with free trade.
But to safeguard minority welfare and achieve distributive justice, institutional design must center on the difference principle. Rawls argued that societal economic arrangements must fulfill four functions. The first is allocation, preventing monopolies, ensuring free enterprise, competition, and market circulation of goods. The second is transfer, managing social welfare and security to counter free market downsides. The third is stabilization, regulating human resources across society. It reduces job market information gaps, connects seekers with work, and prevents mass unemployment like during America's Great Depression. The final function is distribution, handling taxation, such as collecting income tax, estate tax, etc. Rawls believed taxation's purpose isn't government enrichment, but rectifying wealth inequality. Finally, regarding well-ordered societies, the individual-society relationship. Rawls' justice principles aren't just for building new societies, they evaluate existing ones. So, when someone deems existing institutions unjust by these principles, what should they do? Rawls proposed a concept: civil disobedience. If society is unjust, we can adopt nonviolent resistance, publicly stating positions, launching movements, refusing complicity. Yet, we're still breaking laws and must willingly accept legal consequences. Rawls noted, civil disobedience bears deep imprints of its era. In the 1960s and 70s, America was deeply mired in the Vietnam War. As citizens, we all have the obligation to serve in the military as required by law. But if the state drafts you to fight an unjust war, refusing service, while illegal and punishable, is personally just. Rawls hoped that, through mass civil disobedience, we could reform flawed institutions at minimal cost. All right, let's summarize part 2 of justice theory. While Rawls didn't give concrete operational advice, he proposed visions for a fair and just society. First, it should be democratic and law-governed to protect fundamental rights. Second, economically, respect private property while preventing monopolies that exploit the poor. Finally, citizens evaluate institutions using justice principles. If institutions are unjust, we can launch civil disobedience movements. So, Rawls' vision of justice, the societal framework, is now outlined, but a societal framework that can't sustain itself long-term won't work.
Thus, Rawls's final part discusses how to stabilize such a society.
Remember, all groups, from student clubs to nations, are made of people. When members lack shared values, the group disintegrates. This applies equally to Rawls's just society. To maintain stability, cultivate members' sense of justice, making them embrace principles as personal duties. Rawls proposed 3 steps for this. First, get people to value rationality as good. As the saying goes, different strokes for different folks. Everyone has preferences about what's good. Some value money, others education, but all agree rational planning helps achieve desired goods. For instance, to earn through investing, you'd plan rationally, not keep buying crashing stocks. So from the perspective that rationality brings good things, rationality itself is good. Second, if people live long-term in a just society, we'll gradually develop a sense of justice. To prove this, Rawls cites social psychology theories. Though complex, Rawls' point aligns with common sense. Humans often helped become kinder. Thus, living justly, people enjoy benefits and gradually value justice principles,
Third, people realize accepting justice principles is rational, benefiting both individuals and society.
Rawls' justice principles allow full talent development and personal pursuits.
Meanwhile, societal adjustments make inequalities benefit the vulnerable, eliminating discontent and instability. With this, our introduction to a theory of justice concludes. Finally, let's review the entire work. Rawls believed justice is society's most vital virtue. Without it, society crumbles. For him, justice is fairness. Thus, he derived justice principles through the veil of ignorance thought experiment. The veil makes everyone consider choices from the weakest perspective, yielding two principles. First, the greatest equal liberty principle. Everyone's freedoms and rights are equal and inviolable. Second, the difference principle. Societal inequalities are acceptable only if they maximally benefit the least advantaged. The first part of justice theory. Part 2 applies justice principles to practice. Rawls called his envisioned society well-ordered. He designed it through three aspects: political institutions, economic systems, and individual society relations. Part 3 supplements Part 2. It fosters genuine internal acceptance of justice principles to sustain societal stability. Although a theory of justice spans 400,000 words, in a nutshell, justice is fairness. That's its core proposition. Finally, let's briefly comment on the impact of justice theory. First, through this work, Rawls advanced Western capitalist doctrine. During its writing, established capitalist nations championed liberty above all, while emerging socialist states prioritized equality. These ideologies clashed fiercely. Justice theory bridged these ideas, respecting individual freedom while emphasizing equitable resource distribution.
The subsequent rise of Western welfare states owes much to justice theory.
Second, justice theory revived 20th century political philosophy. Since its first edition, over 5,000 monographs globally have engaged with it. It compelled the West to confront real-world inequality and drew diverse scholars into justice debates. For his contributions, President Bill Clinton hailed Rawls as the century's greatest political philosopher, awarding him the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1999 and 1999. From Justice Theory's 1971 publication to Rawls's 1902 death, even today, his just society remains unrealized, with America still grappling with inequality, yet humanity's pursuit persists. Undoubtedly, justice theory is an indispensable milestone in humanity's quest for justice. All right, that concludes our interpretation. Reading notes are below the audio. Until next time.